Welcome to Popcorn Psychology, the podcast where we watch blockbuster movies and psychoanalyze them. My name is Brittany Brownfield, and I'm a child therapist, and I'm joined by
Ben Stover, individual therapist.
Hannah Espinoza, marriage and family therapist.
We're all licensed clinical professional counselors, also known as therapists, who practice out of Chicago. Even though we are licensed mental health professionals, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes and to fulfill our love of dissecting pop culture in all forms.
Please remember that even though we are all licensed therapists, we aren't your therapist.
If you are struggling with mental health symptoms, please find a local mental health provider.
Hello, everybody. So we are touching upon a much requested movie today, The Mummy, 1999 Mummy, not to be confused with the Tom Cruise mega blockbuster, The Mummy, that everybody saw, right?
No one saw that.
You guys all saw Tom Cruise's The Mummy?
No one saw that.
I didn't even know it existed.
No?
It was a colossal flop
Absolutely
that
not.
killed the entire rebirth of the monster universe. It was so bad.
Well, everybody who was listening to this episode thinking we were going to talk about Tom Cruise's The Mummy, I'm sorry, you can turn off now. But everyone is sticking around. We are talking about 1999's The Mummy with comeback kid Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz as the two big leads. And so today we are going to be touching upon kind of a sort of like big general psychological question, which is, why do people go on adventures like this? Why do people put themselves in peril for discovery, for treasure hunting, whatever, especially in these kind of situations where everyone involved doesn't need to do something like this, as they all seem to have more than enough resources for themselves. So before we jump into that, I'm going to throw to our guest today, Charlene. Charlene, if you could please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Charlene MacPherson. I'm an LCSWC. I practice in Maryland. I am the owner of Nerd Adventure Therapy 20, which abbreviates to NAT 20.
Nice. Nice.
I'm a certified therapeutic game master ×2. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I also have a podcast, and that's how we got connected. That is called Mental Health Quest, the Therapist's Office and Beyond, where we talk about diagnoses, what questions you should be asking your therapist, and all sorts of other tips and tricks, as well as what mental health actually feels like for the people who are experiencing it through our practice. So that is it for me, I think.
I think that sounds like enough. Seriously. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Charlene, for joining us and talking about this beloved movie, The Mummy. Like I said at the up top, a lot of people have requested this movie. A lot of people.
A lot.
Yes.
We get so many requests for it, and we love you all for loving us enough to ask us to do it. So here we are doing a fan request episode in this season. We're excited because all of us are exactly the right age that we watched this movie at the theater probably 400 times. And then when it came out on VHS or DVD, and then when it ran on the campus movie channel, and then when it ran at your friend's house who had HBO, I can't think of how many times I must have seen this movie, but it's a lot. I am gonna come out though right now and tell I am a little surprised that people came out this hot for it for our show, because it's such a popcorn movie that there's not a lot of psychological depth, but we're gonna find some anyway. So let's go on an adventure.
Yeah, I think we all came into this recording with the same energy. Charlene, you came in hot though, which we appreciate as a guest to do the heavy lifting for the three of us. In that, no offense, everyone requested it. We were like, this movie, like, no one's really struggling. There was no like psychology stuff that popped up too hard, especially considering like the main character is a vet who has gone through hell and back in multiple different ways, and yet seems totally cool and totally together.
Right. He's French Foreign Legion too. It's not like he left America to go join the most notoriously difficult training where they just basically throw you in the desert with a canteen and go survive, and then you're in the Legion.
Wow, see, I didn't know that about the French Legion.
Oh, he spoke French at the beginning, and yes, I did clock that, and I was like, oh, oui. Rick? Richard?
That's right.
Yes.
The French Foreign Legion is a notoriously difficult thing, so it's the veteranness of it is several levels above. This would be special forces level and
I mean,
mercenaries.
a veteran who fell into a scary, spooky situation, who then is in prison for 3 years, who then is pretty much killed by hanging, but survives. But he's just one good shave and a haircut away from just back at it again.
Yep.
No psychological ramifications. He's a girl that he's got a mad crush on 5 minutes in, and he's like, I'm ready to roll. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, he's fine. You know, he's just back. I mean, because he's a fighter. That's why. That's what they do.
But I think that is what makes movies like this comforting, right? Because as everyone knows now, we have over 100 episodes where we take movies that seem even benign like this at the face of it, and then we talk about it and we're like, gee whiz, dark. And so it is kind of nice to watch a movie that's like a popcorn comfort movie, and it actually is a popcorn comfort movie. Not all movies have to be rip you down to the studs in terms of like seeing yourself on screen or your life experience or whatever. So
Absolutely.
I get why the appeal of this movie, like Ben was saying, the appeal of it to watch, for us to talk about, I don't know, if we've missed something, if y'all are listening and you've requested this movie and we have grossly missed something that you really wanted our takes on, please email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com or message us at our variety of social medias. And, you know, maybe we will answer those questions in like an IG live or something.
Right. And, you know, maybe we'll try that on Threads since Twitter is burning.
I've heard that Threads, though, maybe we'll have to cut this out. It's probably going to be dated as soon as we are finished recording.
Yeah.
But I've heard that people don't like Threads, but you can't delete your Threads without deleting your whole Instagram account. So it's kind of like holding people's hostage so they don't lose their Instagram accounts. Mark Zuckerberg, you've done it again. You've done it again, you evil genius. But yeah, so since we didn't really have a specific like mental health diagnoses or like wildly specific psychological take on this movie, we decided to talk about why do people do this? Why do people go on adventures like this? Because as I said up top, there's no one person in this movie who would be like out on their ass, if you will, if they couldn't find this city, these resources, these jewels, gems, artifacts, what have you. Like everyone would still be fine.
Except Rick.
More than fine.
Except Rick.
Well, Rick, yeah. But he's not the one. He's the only one who's not really invested. So ironically, he's the one that has the most to gain from this and is the least caught up in it in terms of like the thing they're going after itself. He's not like going to be rich off of this. He'll have his life. But it's not, I don't know. It's interesting to watch this again and be like, God, they're really putting themselves through it. And for what? So if either of you,
knowledge.
I mean, each one of this is like the more we talked about this in pre-show, now I can't turn my D&D DM brain off. Of like, the more we talk about it, the more we think about it, because they're D&D characters. That's why.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that answer, please?
Because they are all individualistically motivated by their specific backgrounds, and they're each motivated by the things they're motivated by. Rick is in it for the fight to overcome the fight he lost at the Hamanoptera site. And Evie is in it to prove her knowledge and that she is good enough and to overcome her greatest loss. And Jonathan is in it because he is a fucking rogue and he is a gambler and there is money. That is
I
why.
love it.
There is
Well,
money to be made, and he
End
is
of
a
episode,
gambler.
everybody. Thanks for listening. No, but I think that is interesting because we are lucky, and it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like incidental because I didn't realize this about you, Charlene, until we started talking, that we have you on this episode.
Yeah.
Thinking of it from that perspective, since you do so much work within the realm of D&D, where Hannah and I, not to speak for you, Hannah, but I think you'd agree, Hannah and I are like, I don't even know if I would say we're on the outskirts of D&D knowledge. we're in the neighboring town.
Yeah.
Where sometimes we go visit.
Yeah.
But we're like definitely the neighboring town. Like, what are they up to over there? Like, we'll drink a margarita.
You just hear all the commotion going on in the town over. And sometimes you're like, that sounds like it might be some fun. So let's go check it out. Or they're going to get themselves in a lot of trouble. Maybe we should keep them from doing that.
Right. Although Brittany's trying to play coy right now, but we have a West Marches campaign, that where Brittany does play with us sometimes, and she has a rogue, and she plays it awesome.
I do, and I couldn't tell you one thing about it. I couldn't tell you one thing about it. I'd have to look up my character sheet right now if you wanted me to. I forgot I was a rogue, to be quite honest.
You have a halfling rogue.
Yep, that sounds correct. I just wanted someone sneaky that would steal stuff, and I seem to have to know less about, because I feel like with these ones with the magic and stuff, I feel like there's a lot of remembering things.
Yeah.
Wizards, there's a lot.
Yeah. And I also like the juxtaposition. I would also say Benny was a rogue.
Oh, definitely.
Right. But he didn't have any moral guidance whatsoever. He was just in it for the money. That is it. Whereas Jonathan, I think, had Evie. He was definitely trying to protect her. But he was also definitely there because of the money.
Jonathan is chaotic good.
Mm-hmm.
I think Benny is like pure chaotic neutral.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But Benny has no allegiance to anybody other than staying alive. And he is very, very scared. He is a Chicago native, so it turns out, too.
Oh, you mean he's not native to whatever accent he was doing in that movie? And cultural garb he was wearing?
Fezzes are cool.
Okay, Doctor Who.
According to Doctor Who, yes, they are. Very much.
Or beanies. I guess he had a little beanie. It was the other the other archaeologist or whatever the guy was, the professor who had a fez. Mm-hmm. Benny had a little beanie.
The guy from the Titanic?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Understood.
That's where he's from. Yeah. So I was like, why do I recognize a guy? Mm-hmm. But yes, I think people go on these adventures like this because they're compelled to complete a mission that they failed, and they're compelled to earn their place in society. On a psychological level, we have to overcome the failures that we have encountered that we know we can win and reclaim our status. There's a part of us that won't let it go until we complete its mission. I said I wouldn't talk about parts, but I lied. There's a closing loops kind of metaphor that I've been working on and kind of drawing maps for. But so essentially a part that has not finished its mission has a open loop that keeps getting drawn back to, and it seeks to close the loop. So what I mean by that is a part is a sub function of our personality that evolves to meet a need that our core self couldn't do by itself. So we had to form a separate part of our identity that could do what we couldn't. And when that part evolves after the event is over, we stay stuck with that part active. Its loop is not closed. And anytime we get something close to the situation that triggered the formation of the part, people will get drawn in. You can think about it like looking at Uncle Rico from the
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yep.
You pulled that out of your ass.
I sure did. Or, so if we're going to stick with football, you can, a good old friend, Al Bundy. Like, no matter what it was, you could get him talking about football and he would tell you the same story over and over. Got through 4 touchdown passes. And Uncle Rico is still videotaping himself at 35 or 40 years old, throwing footballs like some scout is going to come pick him up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
tying it into random pop culture references, but really recognizing that people who have parts of them active that have been rejected by something then get on a quest and a mission to prove their worth. And that sometimes won't turn off until you do the thing and get a corrective experience.
Yeah, and we were talking about earlier, Evie gets rejected on multiple levels, right? It's like she gets rejected by the Bembridge scholars. She doesn't seem to be very appreciated by the guy who's running the museum. I mean, she did destroy the library, but there's that. And they wouldn't take her because she didn't have enough experience in the field.
Right.
And so again, like she had to prove something. She had to prove her worth in the field. So that's why she went 100%.
Right. And Jonathan went because dollars. Because he lost, he tells us right off the bat that he never finds anything. He never finds anything of substance. So he's probably ultimately, because he's an archaeologist too, isn't he? Like, so he's probably a multi-class.
I mean, I don't feel like maybe I wasn't listening hard enough, and I don't really remember enough details from the second movie, other than the fact that they have a kid, not Jonathan, but Evie and Rick. In that he does seem, I mean, the way I interpreted Jonathan was as a typical, like, rich, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a, like, definitely a pleasure seeker, not a rake, but that definite sort of scallywag kind of energy. I don't know what the posh term for that is, but I can't find it. But he struck me more as, well, I think what's really interesting with them, so I'm going to switch a little bit, is that Jonathan is the older of the two siblings. And I found that really interesting. They do that thing I hate in movies where they will call after each other as their relation to each other. Well, hello there, baby sister. No one has ever done that in the history of time. I have many siblings. They've never said to me, they've never even called me sister. You know what I mean? Like, hey, sister, maybe when they were drunk screaming down the street. I don't know. But like this thing that they do in movies is like a quick way to like make connections, drives me a little bonkers because it's so unnatural. And I feel like I've only seen it in movies and TV shows, never in real life. I was like, you can't find a more natural way to like figure out how they're connected to each other. Anyways, but Jonathan does seem kind of like that like aimless rich kid. I think what's interesting to establish with him and Evie right away is that they are nepo babies. They are rich kids, right? Like the librarian owner says right away, like, the only reason why I put up with you and probably the brother is because your parents have supported, basically. They have been significant patrons to this. So Jonathan, I do think, is interesting in terms of the aspirations, in that I wonder how much he's there because Evie's there and their parents were there. And Jonathan doesn't strike me as a person who has done a lot of introspection. And so I could see him going on an adventure like this for a few reasons. One, the money, the surface level stuff, like the money. Yeah. He seems like someone that, even though he probably has a lot of money, also probably seems like he has a lot of debts, like he's always outrunning his trust fund, if you will. Is how I imagine him. Then I think, I don't know if he knows how to be a person without Evie. They almost feel more like twins than he's like the older sibling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that, I feel like he would go anywhere that Evie went, no matter how dangerous it is, because I don't know if he knows how to be his own person.
He may not. And don't forget, like, if unless they have different parents, which seems doubtful, that he is part Egyptian too. As Evie says, like, the two white, I know, right? They look very Middle Eastern, right? Two white English actors look very, very, like they're half Middle Eastern, yes, half Egyptian. But Evie does say, like, Dad came here from England and Mom was Egyptian. And that's part of what draws her to it. And Jonathan does say right in the beginning, I go out on these digs and I never find anything. And he found the key.
Okay.
Yeah, he did.
So I think he is an archaeologist or something. Maybe he's, a benefactor.
A gentleman explorer.
Yes.
That seems like the thing of that time.
He's an executive producer.
Yeah.
He shows up and
of
funds
this
the show.
excavation, yes.
Yeah.
But is not involved in the creative at all. Just goes like, here's money, do things, and make
We'll
me
let you
feel
hold
important.
a shovel, Jonathan, over there. But don't go where any of the flags are.
Exactly.
Right. But he does have the roguish energy to him where he knows he can be slick and relies on it, but he can't resist the gambling. So there's definitely likely something of an I am not the favorite child of my academic parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And trying to prove himself because he knows the language as well. Because at the end, he reads the book.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's a
he
good
has
point.
all the same education that Evie does. He can read the same, he's not as good at it because there's that one scene where Noxum is trying to kill Evie and she's like translating as they're yelling back and forth. But like he still knows all the information. He still has to be super duper smart to be able to know a dead language. You know what I mean? So again, like I see him more as like the goofballness is the cover for the pain that's going on because he can't prove himself. He doesn't feel as worth as much as his sister, like, all that different kind of stuff because he never, comes through with the good stuff. And that goofball. I said he also has some like addictive type behaviors as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so he was like seeking out this thrill constantly over and over and over again. And we know a lot of that is like, okay, when you're in tons of pain, you go to seek out that thrill to kind of help, quench that pain, right? And so that's what I kind of see him as is like the goofballness is his protection. It's his shell. It's his face his mask that he wears. But really underneath, he's super smart and can do this. Just nobody has confidence in him.
I agree. Because Jonathan does show up to be quite competent. But I think, that lack of faith in other people or lack of faith in him resulted in him going like, fine, I'll go out and use my smarts to manipulate and trick people, including you, and do what sounds fun to me because he is inherently mischievous.
Well, I think he and Evie are both, I don't know if I would say impulsive, but they both definitely do things without thinking all the way through. And like
reading from the book,
even the way
you never read from the book out loud. That is like a D&D rule, straight up. Don't read from the book out loud. It's never a good idea.
Right.
It's not
do
doing
you know
what
the
you
language?
think it's doing. It's not doing what you think it's doing.
But I would say even like how she's introduced in the movie, like if she would have taken 5 seconds, I should say, to think about reaching across, like she doesn't have the patience to just go down the ladder, go across, put the ladder, go up. Like they both are, as you see time and time again in the movie, people that will take shortcuts, like their attention span will take shortcuts, and they just do things without thinking. Like I would even say the way Jonathan smacks that one guy to wake him up. Like there's all these little things they both do throughout the movie that are so pleasure driven or like spontaneous or impulsive or very like, I'm having a thought and now I'm going to execute that thought. And that's the whole timeline.
Yeah. I call this the inner squirrel. And both of them have an inner squirrel because the inner squirrel is the way I think of ADHD as being a person who has it. My inner squirrel also leads me on little adventures that sometimes are not the best decisions or the most thought out decisions. But then the other side of it, which I think Evie finds with herself, and so does Jonathan, is the personality type that says, I'm fine. We'll be fine. I don't care what it is. I'm just going to do it. And if I make a bad decision, I'll make another decision to correct it later. I don't care. It's fine. We'll figure it out.
Same. That's why I identify with those two characters so much. I'm like, I would have done the latter thing. I would have totally done the latter thing and been like, I'm not getting all the way down off of this ladder to move it over here and get all the way back up. I'm going to take the shortcut. And it would end up the exact same way it did in the movie. But
you mean where you fail your dex check?
Yes, exactly. But
she rolled a 1 on that dex check.
I would totally do it. So like maybe even diagnosing, Evie and Jonathan with maybe a little bit of ADHD.
Yeah,
would be
the possibility.
A possibility, I think, because I definitely recognize some of my behaviors in there.
Yeah, you see it and you just go like, "Oh, that's me." Oh no!
Yeah.
No!
I've done that.
I did that. I would do that. Like, God damn it! All right.
Well, and I think they have that thing to them, which I do think is why people who have ADHD can fly under the radar, which is that if you are very smart, then that can, and have resources, like we said, they're also very privileged in many ways. And so there is.
Evie married James Bond. She's fine.
Well, I was even thinking of the fact that, like, if I would have done the latter thing and all those things fell down, I would have been like throwing up out of anxiety. I would be like on my hands and knees, like, I'm so sorry. I will stay here day and night until I clean it. Like, please, please, please. And so the fact that she immediately goes into praising herself, I feel like says a lot about the privileged position that they're in.
Yeah.
And he rightly, checks her on that. And I would say they have that thing, both of them going for them, which is that you're really smart, so you can kind of wiggle your way or talk your way or prove your way out of the pickles you're in. And so then you never really sometimes learn from those experiences because you can sort of wiggle your way out of it. And I said, not just because they're smart, but also because they have all these other resources. Like with Evie, she doesn't really have to fix that part of her, because even when she literally destroys half that library, that guy basically says you're unfireable because of your resources. So I guess we're both going to suck this up and keep it moving.
Yeah.
Or because she can prove her worth in other ways, it allows her to get away with, and Jonathan, with not really taking accountability for this part of their personality that they seem to be letting go wildly unchecked, both of them.
Yep. and then because he's also underestimating her, he meets a part of her that's sassy and snarky, and he's likely constantly underestimating her. And lo and behold, he's Magi. And the only person who could have unlocked and found that book was the one person he's been shitting on and keeping under his thumb. This is a D&D campaign. Just is. Like,
when I say one, I was like, this is a D&D campaign. Like, straight up. Just in Egypt.
It's like 100% a D&D campaign. Like, the monster is making its way and, like, cutting through the, like, soulless NPCs who are with you on the journey to get destroyed. And, like, this is D&D. I hear Stephen Lynch in my head going, it's D&D.
Yeah. And when you, like you said, when you do have kind of the smarts and a lot of the times the creativity too, like with the ADHD, thinking outside the box.
Yep.
You don't get diagnosed. Also, just in our world, if you're female and you have the female symptoms of ADHD, which again, that's me. You don't get diagnosed until you're 35. When you go to your doctor and go, I have ADHD. You need to diagnose me with it. No, you don't. Give me the test. And then they're like, oh, yeah, no, you are. And I'm like, I know.
Right. Like, I know. By the way, have you seen the squirrel outside? Because it's really nice. And like, oh, look at that. There's a possum. Oh, wait, hold on. Like, oh, wait, what were we talking about? Oh, yeah. Then I have ADHD. Give me the stimulant so my brain can work and then I can hear colors and smell sounds.
And I do think it's interesting that Jonathan and Evie also seem to have no anxiety. even in the face of danger, which could be a sign of ADHD if I really think about it. It's like the more stimulated they become. Because even I wrote this down. I didn't write a ton of notes for this movie just because the reasons we talked about at the beginning. But Jonathan makes a joke when they talk about Evie being the human sacrifice. He basically says, "Sucks to be you." And I'm like, your sister is in like mortal peril right now. Like your sister, like the worst case scenario is happening, and you can't even stop yourself from cracking a joke about it in the not even in like a out of anxiety, but just very casual, like, oh man, sucks. And it's like, bro, like, and just the most casual, like it hasn't occurred to him to be worked up about this yet or at all.
Yeah, he's like, bad luck, mom.
And then like earlier in the movie, when Jonathan and Evie go to Rick when he's still imprisoned, like he gets, I can't remember how, but he gets knocked out or something and he's on the ground. And Evie walks over
Rick punches him in the face.
Oh, yeah, Rick punches him in the face.
Oh, yeah. And Evie walks over Jonathan's body to get to Rick to ask her further questions. Like these two, it's like they have no anxiety. They are a lot alike now that we're talking about them more. They both just have like eyes on the prize. They don't really, their blood pressure doesn't really seem like it rises. And even in high stress situations, they seem to like keep it together.
Yeah, they're
in
twins.
A way that's
they're
not
twins.
Doesn't make sense.
You mean they get hyper focused?
Yeah, because even Rick's the one like hollering.
Don't see anything else.
Yeah,
and will actually make really bad jokes with really bad timing because they're not reading the room. They're just hyper focused on what they want to do.
Yeah. Because even Rick is like screaming and hollering and like, ah! Like Rick is fully reacting, and he's the one that has the most like physical way to keep himself safe. And he is more activated from a sensible place, not even from a traumatic place, from a sensible place than those two jokers that he's like pulling from behind him. Like, can we please go somewhere else? And can you guys stop touching things and looking at stuff? He like needs to fully leash them, which he kind of tries to do, I feel like, throughout the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, why are you getting into fights with the camel guy? Why are you getting into fights with this guy? He does remind me, I had a friend in high school where we would go to the mall and I'd make him hold my hand, even though he was like 16 years old. Because I was like, if I don't hold Jeremy's hand, we're gonna lose Jeremy. And then he's gonna be making friends with some like 80-year-old on the bench, like on the floor below us. So it is kind of that energy that Rick has with them, which is like, where are my children? Come here, sit here, stop picking fights, stop touching things.
Yeah, he definitely has that energy with them.
Yeah,
Rick does not have ADHD. He's very like in tuned and focused and like always on the ball and on the game. And like he's just like with Jonathan especially, he's just like, oh my god.
Yeah. So on that note, we will take a break here. So I think we've pretty much summarized that Evie and Jonathan would go on an adventure like this. One, because it probably would be pleasing to their adrenaline seeking selves, that hyper-stimulated thing. And then two, like we said, well, I think you brought up a really great point earlier, Charlene, which is that you're right. Whenever I meet someone who acts like Jonathan in the therapeutic space, there is typically, it's that class clown thing where underneath that, there's something really going on that's meaningful. And you're just trying to act like you don't give a shit. And this is the way you act like you don't give a shit. Because if you really gave a shit, it would hurt. And it does hurt. So I think you're right. Jonathan's going for a myriad of reasons, but I'm sure part of it too is some credibility. And then Evie going because she's a woman and her own excitement. So I think they do have those other reasons why they want to go on top of what we've just discerned, which is they're probably like so fucking jazzed internally to like go on an adventure.
Inner squirrel can't be turned off.
Yeah, they're like, because I'll say Jonathan's never like, I don't know if this is a good idea, guys. He's always like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Not one time.
No, even when the whole city is collapsing on them at the end, he stops in the treasure room and thinks about trying to go for some of the treasure.
The anxiety, I'm like full Rick in this situation. Like I would be going, I would knock them probably both unconscious and strap them to camels and be like, you guys are giving me so much anxiety.
That's probably why the couple works so well, right? Like, I think a lot of people that I work with ADHD, they tend to partner with someone who tends to be like Rick. It's like a very calming type of presence, because we need that stability.
Well, what's so funny about you saying that is, as I was watching it, I was thinking, is Evie the overfunctioner to Jonathan's underfunctioner, right? Which we talked about in other situations, which I think is it can be a typical sibling dynamic, especially in this kind of situation where we've established that they're twins. That's canon now. Jonathan and Evie are twins. Or maybe they're Irish twins. But
they're twins in our head canon, and they can argue. People can argue with it if they want to.
And maybe she's like 5 minutes younger than him. And but I wonder too, based on what you just said, Charlene, if it's almost like Rick is the overfunctioner to like
Rick is the overfunctioner.
Evie's underfunctioning. And that's why their dynamic works, because he's paying attention to everything and she's like Lottie dying. He's like, I'm going to keep you going in this straight line this way. So yeah, I think you're definitely right that dynamic feels satisfying because of that.
And I'm thinking about what you said, Charlene, and thinking about like my wife and I both have ADHD, and I'm trying to think like, is one of us a calming presence? No, I think we're more like Evie and Jonathan, but like not the sibling type, but like both of us are like two little squirrels that like one can overfunction in other ways and the other can like
complementary.
Yes, there's some complementary, but also it is entirely possible one of us would step over the other who fell over to meet one of our goals.
But I think that's an interesting segue to the other thing we were speculating on before we started the recording today, which is another reason why people go on adventures like this, which is individualism versus collectivism. So we've touched upon our like, central three, Rick, Evie, and Jonathan, but they're not the only ones on this adventure, right? There are, what would you say is in D&D language? Are they like rival campaigners?
NPCs.
Okay. There are rival campaigners who are also trying to beat them to this treasure. And so it kind of led us to talking about, before we were recording, about...
And the Magi.
Well, this is the thing. Individualism is what we see through all the people wanting to go for the treasure. Collectivism is what we see from the Magi, who are trying to defend the treasure.
Right, but if we look at who's like most individualistic versus least, like our group of adventurers are very individualistic, but bonded to each other, but no one else.
Yeah.
And then the other group of the NPC group is more so collectivistic. They're tied together. They function as a unit. They rarely function individually. And they have other groups of like the groups of people they've hired, probably for nothing. And then the Magi, who function entirely as a unit on a collectivistic world-saving mission that our individualistic adventuring party fucks up, as usually happens in D&D.
Well,
and then have to fix it by joining the collectivistic.
Because I'm thinking about, like, why do people go on adventures like this? I think what was coming up for me in terms of individualism is that, and we were talking about this before, is that there is no consideration for the community in which they are impeding upon in order to get that treasure. There's no forethought about what will happen potentially to the group if I make this choice versus that choice. Like, there's a lot of individual ego, individual goals, even with the collective groups, like you were talking about, like the NPC group, if you will. They're also doing a lot of looking out for themselves, and maybe they have little friendships here and there that they're being thoughtful to, like the guy who lost his eyeballs, for instance. But there isn't a sense of sacredness, even from Evie, who should fucking know better. There isn't a sense of, this discovery isn't for us. This discovery isn't for us even culturally. This discovery what is gained collectively, communally from this discovery. It's all very like Evie wants to be respected as a woman within the community she's in, or as a man within the community she's in. Jonathan wants to be respected. Rick wants to stay alive, which is, that. And the other people, it's a lot of like glory and money.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Glory in different ways.
But it's money for their group, which is where like our band of adventurers here, like they're out for their individual goals. They don't care so much about the money, except Jonathan, but they want their goals met. The other group, they're gonna, swarm in as an organized group, split everything equally, and then move on to finding another treasure somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Which is, in my opinion, very individualistic, in that it's purely for personal gain.
Yeah.
Which I would include being the gain of the group. But how does it benefit me?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they are coming obviously from individualistic culture.
Yeah.
Like there's no argument there. I just mean like as you look at them, like the degrees of individualism start to step out between our groups. And you see the power of that in the way that the groups interact differently. Like the other group, like I said, they all function as a unit all the time. They function as a unit. They all kind of have the same roles. They don't differentiate their roles. They all just kind of come in, do the thing, and then leave. Where our group, they all come in, like do their thing, their individual thing. Now that could be, film time economics, but also I think you can recognize that a military or business culture that people, well, we're together doing this thing as a band of adventurers. We're coming in and doing this, and then we leave. We come into our mission and leave. Whereas people who come in on their own thing for their own reasons are even more likely to take risks. Because the adventurer group, like when they are going to go and open the sarcophagus, the professor goes like, wait. Use the diggers. Use the diggers. Our group is digging shit up them damn selves.
Yeah.
And consulting no one ever on anything.
Oh, he was either really revered, or he did something really, really naughty. Well, let's see what he looks like. Let's just keep going. That part, I was like, if I found a sarcophagus in a place that was like not supposed to be there, like the lead coffin they found at Notre Dame, I was like, leave that shit. Leave it. Just leave it unopened. We don't need a vampire. That's the reason why it's lead. Just leave it.
Right. So there's a reason you may not know of, and just because you may have ruled it to be superstition from an ancient culture doesn't mean there's not some validity to it.
Right.
Which is the point of the Magi in this, of trying to communicate that, hey, just because a society is ancient or old doesn't mean that the values of it are invalid due to your industriousness. Just because you can sell the items to pad some collector's pockets, and the Batman of archaeology, Indiana Jones, isn't here to remind you that this belongs in a museum.
How dare you say Batman and Indiana Jones like that? Like,
agreed.
Batman fucking wishes he was the Indiana Jones of anything.
I know, that's right.
I would like you to
Batman
prove to me
use
that they could not be the same person in 3 sentences or less. Go.
Definitely doesn't have the money.
That's what I was going to say. He doesn't have the money.
That's it.
He doesn't wear a costume that covers up his face.
Oh,
because he's not a coward.
Or his name or his voice too. He doesn't do a weird,
and he doesn't do a fake fucking
voice
to be Indiana Jones.
Look at that. Hannah perked up to hate on Batman.
Yeah, exactly. I fucking hate Batman.
So, like, just as a worldview type of thing, like us, the Americans, their history is so young. Like, we don't realize how young our country actually is. Like, these Magi have been, protecting this thing for 3,000 years.
Right.
Like, and this is not like, it was like maybe 500 years ago or 600 years. This was like the beginning of written language and time and governments and, all that different kind of stuff. So, like, I always wonder whether the individualistic kind of attitude comes from just being so young and naive, right? Like our culture is not that old. It is really not that old.
Yeah.
No.
As compared to like a 3,000 to 5,000 year old culture like Greece or Egypt or, all that different kind of stuff.
But yet the way we teach about our culture and the culturalisms of it is always, but we're the best. And,
Right.
In the 1930s, like
Just
this is
a fucking
still
joke.
It's a funny joke, but there also is some degree of truth to it too, compared to some places, and then some places none truth whatsoever.
Yeah.
But when you recognize that teaching it that way makes people ignorant, and that definitely was the point of the Americans in this story, of looking at how ignorant they look and like how even young their mentalities are. Like they were definitely all portrayed as like jackass cowboys.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And they were very teenagery.
Yeah. And I think too, which is a very American thing, and also I would wager a British thing, because my assumption why Evie is part Egyptian and part British is that a bit of the good old fashioned colonialism, right? And so I think what that concept of colonialism and American, like even going west kind of energy, is that if you can conquer a space, if you can go towards a space and you can take it over with either wits or will or weaponry or whatever, then you've earned it. It's sort of that meritocracy kind of concept behind individualism as well, is that if you can earn it, if you can beat it out, if you can climb the top of that hill, then you deserve that hill, regardless of whether you were actually the first person to get there, regardless if the hill, quote unquote, belongs to you, all that stuff. And so I think that is a big part of what comes into play culturally with these groups, right? Is this idea that, well, if I can get there first, which is we literally see, then I've earned it. I'm allowed to have it. I'm allowed to do whatever I want with it. And there's no, like, I think if this movie was made today or made in like present day, there would be more discussions amongst the white people, if you will, about whether this is something they even should be doing, much less like if they can do it, it's should we do it? And you're right, the Magi is that more collective energy coming up and being like, what the fuck? Like, this isn't, who do you think you are? Like, not only who do you think you are, but this has nothing to do with you, and you're gonna like fuck shit up. Like, can you think for 5 fucking seconds beyond like what you can gain and think about? It's like the idea of just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. When people talk about science, I mean, Oppenheimer's coming out soon. That's another, it's this idea of, I think,
while you're
that
quoting
we have
Jurassic Park
with meritocracy, which is, well, if I can do it and it is benefits me in some way, then why wouldn't I? And I think the more collectivist concept, and the way that I understand it, knowing that I was raised in individualistic culture, is, well, what does it benefit in terms of not just you, but the environment, the people around you, the group as a whole, the future, the past? Like, there's thoughtfulness that goes into it way past, I think, what we are trained to think. And as a therapist, I have to do a lot of work, especially with men I work with, actually, who I think get way more caught up in that meritocracy concept and that individualistic concept, and how detrimental it is, even from, ironically, an individual standpoint. So I do a lot of unpacking with clients about this part of our culture and how harmful it can be, and how it breaks us down communally, and then we get very lonely, or then we make mistakes and yada yada. So it is interesting to see it shown in this movie, and during a time, and I will say during a time, and I mean that by 1999, where there still wasn't any, I think, cultural scruples around the choices our gang of misfits was making.
No,
I mean, definitely not. And now there's much more attention drawn to it. Like, can you imagine the scene with Killmonger in Black Panther happening in 1999 in the museum, where he's
definitely not.
like standing in the British Museum or something, right? Like telling them, like, you guys stole all this. You stole it. Like, you display it. Like, you. Like, it's
well, even
kind
us watching Indiana Jones 5 last night, Hannah, Ben, and I all went and saw the new indie movie last night together. And even then, I was kind of surprised that they still used the line, "This belongs in a museum." I know that's his line, so I wasn't shocked that they did it because that's like his tagline, right? And that is the big topic, like you're saying, Ben, of like, well, does this belong in a museum, Indiana? Or does this belong with the people that created it or the country that it comes from?
Right. Which is becoming like a big issue with the British Museum and things, like where the Rosetta Stone stands is still in London in the British Museum. I've been there and I've seen it. And you have to wonder of like, is this yours?
Sure the fuck not.
But our museums are full of stuff like that too. But museums are starting to give stuff back.
Yeah,
They should.
Yeah,
and like Greece and Egypt and even Iraq and Iran are demanding things back. Going, these Babylonian statues you have belong here. These are the relics of our people. And the Magi having that energy and that being brought up in 99 when we're still watching missile strikes in Kosovo on TV, like, that's a cool thing to do. It is definitely starting a narrative that needed to happen. And it is important to recognize as a therapist that we will encounter people that are from other places, that are from more collectivistic cultures than our own, that exist within our country. And we have to recognize that the importance of not giving clients advice about how to operate their culture is the same thing that happens in this movie. Like, you shouldn't be giving people advice about how to operate their own culture. You should be facilitating a conversation to empower them to be the best source of knowledge about what needs to be done and empowering them to be the expert and sitting with them in the space that they educate you on, not the one you decide for them is right, because your point of view may be completely irrelevant to their world. Just like we see with this, the decisions that these people make trying to correct their individual problems potentially fuck the entire world by bringing in Gozer the Destroyer, aka the Mummy.
Well, also, I think what's connecting the dots for me too with this is when you're being raised in individualistic culture, there's more of this idea of like, I know better. Like, even what you're bringing up, which there's so many artifacts from other countries that are in American museums and British museums. And if you really think about that, what's the underlying belief then? That we know how to keep these things safe better than you. These things are safer and will be treated better with us white people than with you, right? Like, we can't trust you. That's why I think like the arguments sometimes that are being made still about why they won't return things is like, but we know how to take care of it. And it's like, you don't think they have museums in Egypt, in Iran, that they can have their local artifacts in?
Also, you found it 3,000 years after we did it in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think we know how to take care of it.
Right,
and so then it trickles to these individual things with, like, no offense, Evie, where what does that teach you then as an individual from these communities? It's like, well, I know better. So I am right to open this up, and I am right to take that from them. Like, I do know better. I'm smarter. I'm, from a more well-rounded, like, this way we don't take you guys seriously. Because they got warned, like, right in the beginning of this movie by the library guy, whose name I can't remember, wearing the fez, of like, will you fucking pump your fucking goddamn brakes? And Evie's like, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to ignore it because I know better. Yeah. And that ego, that is something that comes up in therapy a lot when I work with people, where I'm like, this ego you have where you cannot listen to counter information is fucking your shit up and it's pissing people off. And it's in like this kind of situation, it's causing real calamity because you cannot sit in the discomfort of hearing information that does not agree with you or does not please you or challenges you.
But wait, what kind of risk are we talking about here? Like the plagues of Egypt or anything? Like that could be real, like flesh-eating locusts that could just appear out of the sky, or like comets raining down. Like, come on, like come on.
Yeah.
I mean,
And they
they'll
didn't
be
take
fine.
They didn't take it seriously until the wine turned to blood. That was interesting.
The
They were
fact
like,
that
"Oh, now
put it
it's
in their
real."
mouths. The
I
fact
was
that
like,
they put it in their mouths first.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so fucking sick. The fact that they tasted it, spit it out, and they were like, it tastes like blood. I would be screaming, it tastes
Yeah.
like blood. What do you mean casually remarking that it tastes like blood? I'd be like, like I would be apoplectic. You'd have to like carry me back to my room. And then I'd be like, oh God.
Also, I'm pretty sure Egypt was a British colony at this point.
Oh, I'm
Still.
sure it was.
And the sun, this is still definitely the point in time where the sun never sets on the British Empire. I don't think that ended until the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this idea would have been starkly present. And America at this point in time was starting to retreat into individualism after the breakdown of the economy. And we're shutting back down, because this would have been, or maybe this is right, starting the New Deal. Yeah, depending if this is the 20s or the 30s, I can't remember what year frame it is, but this is either in American collectivism after World War I, or this is where, which would probably be why Rick joined the first place. If he wants that kind of adventure, America's not doing it at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
They're shutting down. They're going, nope, we're building up our country. We're not fucking around with your stuff at all.
I was thinking that in the beginning scenes because I'm no history buff. And I was like, what war would he be fighting right now in that area of the world in like the late 20s, early 30s? Because it's not World War One. So you're right. Like I was thinking about like that he would have had to go find that conflict.
Yeah. Well, Rick is of the age that he probably was in World War One.
Oh, for sure.
Considering he carries so much weaponry from it. And then to see all of the like industrious mindset that these people would have been like, or not the individualistic mindset, the self-gain, the capitalistic, imperialistic mindset that all these people are adopting. Like the Americans are more on the adventure side, and the British folks are definitely on the imperial side of it, where like, well, we're better than you, we conquered you, so you know, all of this is kind of our stuff anyway, and we're better than you. And Evie definitely has suffered from cultural appropriation, where she's going like, well, yeah, but I speak the language and all that stuff, but you don't know what it means just because you speak a language.
Yeah.
It isn't ingrained into your soul. Like, you don't understand the relevance or the legends or anything else. Like, just because you speak the history doesn't make you a part of it.
Don't forget, she's half Egyptian. Her mother is Egyptian.
Yeah, and I'm part Swedish, so like,
I
well,
do
I need to
feel
go
like
ahead and
that
adopt
is-
Viking culture.
But that does feel like the movie's way of trying to be like, but she's not like the other white people. She's part Egyptian. It's like Egyptian the way that Cleopatra was Egyptian. It's like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget that later on she realizes that she was Nefertiti or something in a past life.
I recall.
Was that
I
the
do remember
second
that.
one or the
That's
third
the
one?
second one. No, the second
Yeah,
one,
that's
because
the
Rachel
second one.
Weisz is doing all the cool fight scenes
Yeah,
in like Egyptian garb from back in the day.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nefertiti, the Nubian queen, was obviously a white Jewish woman from England.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. So on that note, we'll take another break. All right. Is there anything else we want to touch upon with this concept before we jump into treatment? I know in talking about treatment with this movie, we're doing a little differently this time in that, like we talked about before, this movie is pretty simple. So there isn't really anybody that we're like, oh, they definitely need therapy after this, because everyone seems to be movie magic fine.
Yep.
So we're going to take this opportunity to have our guest Charlene elaborate further on the D&D part of it and how she utilizes it in the work she does as a therapist. So this is sort of a treatment corner, but not necessarily treatment specific to the characters in this movie.
Right. So like we had identified that Evie and Jonathan probably have ADHD, right?
Yes.
And what I feel like you see in this movie too is that as an ADHDer, they thrive in the chaos. They thrive in the quick thinking. They thrive in the hunting. They thrive in not the routine, right? That's and that's what a lot of ADHDers are good at. Except for most of us don't have the money to go on a Egyptian archaeological dig. So what I do is I have my clients who have ADHD, some trauma, social anxiety, regular anxiety, generalized anxiety. I have them identify their goals. So we identify that Evie and Jonathan both want to prove themselves, right? They don't feel very confident in themselves. They don't feel like they're, worth very much at the beginning, right? And they had to go through this life and death journey to be able to gain that confidence. Well, as a therapist, I think it's pretty unethical to try and ask your client to go through a life and death journey to learn something. So that's where the D&D comes in. So what we do is we, identify the goal, which, maybe it is to prove yourself that you are smart and you are a good team member and you do know what you're good at very, very well. And you want to prove that to other people. We build that into the character that they're going to play at the D&D table in a group. And everybody in that group is working on something. So everybody knows that everybody else is working on their mental health goals. And basically, I would put them through the story of the mummy. And it would be a great opportunity. Each one of those conflict points or, where they find something or they figure out the mystery or, whatever it is, that is a great opportunity for that person to show their worth, to speak up, to kind of like in that practice area, kind of prove themselves as somebody who knows what they're doing or to find that kind of worth. And hopefully the idea is the more they practice it at the D&D table, the more practice they get, then they'll just go ahead and take it out into the real world, out into their real lives. So that's how I would use this movie and these characters. And I love their growth arcs. I love all of it.
Yeah. I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts for like treatment for this movie? Ben, Hannah?
I mean, I am not a therapeutic game master, although I would like to be at some point. But I think building off this idea, because it is something, I have a lot of clients who are geeky and we have a lot of discussions about these things. And I have DM'd a fair amount of games to this point, and I get the idea of how D&D could be helpful and will work it in with clients who have the language to do that so that I can work to speak a language that's meaningful to them. And I think I love the idea of working into a campaign with people through a facsimile of themselves that can do things that their mental blocks won't let them do. Because their negative voices don't apply to their characters. Their inner critic doesn't apply to what their character can do. No, at least not as strongly.
Yeah, and there's no real world consequences. So like if you're, as a therapist, the main thing that always bugged the heck out of me about trying to teach social skills and have people follow through on their cognitive behavioral goals as well is there are real world consequences when you set a boundary. So if you set a boundary with your boss, there could be a very real world consequence that your boss is not going to be very happy with you.
Right. And welcome to the extinction spike, my friend.
Right. And so you're less likely to do it. Right. So, or the clients are less likely to do it. I wanted to create a microcosm of society, of a team, of, leadership, of all of the things that you get in a D&D session, good versus evil, moral quandaries, all of those things come up in D&D, but it's in a space that doesn't have any real world consequences. So you can either go with what you as the person would respond, or some people play the opposite of themselves to try things out, to be like, I had one person who had severe social anxiety, and they played a loud, boisterous, entitled king character who said whatever he thought, didn't heal anybody, even though he was the cleric.
Love when people fundamentally misunderstand or deliberately so.
But he was like, I'm gonna play him like a butthead, and he said asshole, but I don't know if we're supposed to curse on here.
You can swear as much as you want.
You can curse.
Okay. And he's like, I'm gonna play him like an asshole. I was like, okay. And what he found out was the rest of the group loved that character so much that like he was the favorite character out of the whole campaign. Where he was used to being the one who was quiet, off to the side, nobody noticed him, like blah, 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 blah. They named a bug that they adopted after that character. They did all sorts of stuff and were really engaged with that character. And so he got to see that, even if you are loud and boisterous and, stuff like that, doesn't necessarily mean people are going to hate you or they're going to discard you or ostracize you. If, you do it in a fun, kind of self-worth type of way, right? It was so funny to watch that. They're so funny.
And it has to be rewarding to see that. And I love building those kinds of things. And it's even when I DM, there's sometimes like where when I know I have characters, like let's say somebody has a little bit of an impulse problem. I'm gonna call out my buddy Dwiggins because I know he'll listen to this, and I'm gonna tell him like, Dwiggins, I build Dwiggins traps into my DM sessions for you. Because, we all have that one character or one friend that plays a thing that will always fuck around and find out, will always go off on their own in the campaign and like trigger traps and do like, you're like, dude, stay with the party. And they'll be like, oh, I'm going to go, what about this building? Like, yeah, we'll go there. Well, I'm going to go check out that building. And like, that's Jonathan and Evie. And like, you build traps in and you just go like, you can like therapeutically do that where you give people consequences that you build in that don't translate to real world, or you can go like, look, if you keep doing it the same way, and then they start to learn from it and they go like, wait a minute, and then you can later have the conversation with somebody of like, so have you ever encountered a D&D situation where maybe your DM kind of learned some of your mistakes and like some of your impulsivities and then started kind of building options into the campaign that like, and this is a trap. This is your DM telling you this is a trap and it will go poorly. And they're like, well, maybe it's not a trap. Maybe if I do it this way, like, no, there is no way you can win this.
What I also like to do with my ADHD players is kind of, yes, if it's the impulsivity, but I'll also build in, reinforcement. So when one of my players was a new player, never played D&D before, had ADHD, and was like, I'm going to do 4 flips off of the walls, and I'm going to jump on the back of the spider, and blah, blah, blah. And in D&D, like, usually you'd roll for that. I was like, no, you do that thing. Like, you land on the spider, you do a 3-point landing. It's great. And he was really excited, right? Yeah. Because one of the things in training they told us was like, never have anybody roll unless you're willing to let them fail.
Right.
And that was the first time that he had tried something really creative. So I was like, no, I want to reinforce this as much as possible. And then he ended up through the whole campaign coming up with really fun, kind of moves to do. He was a rogue. He used the people's elbow on the main big bad evil guy at one point. Like it was amazing to watch him get reinforced for that creativity instead of told, no, that's not how we do this. Right. And I feel like, so if you have the consequences for the impulsivity, but you also give them the opportunity to use that impulsivity and that creativity, then it's going to balance each other out. Right.
Right. Which is what I try to do. It's like have that balance with it, with like, if you do the impulsive thing in the dumb way, it's going to go bad. Yeah. But if you do it in the way that benefits the party,
Mhm.
or like make sense to what the campaign is, instead of like, but I should be able to win if I do this. And like, you literally can't win if you do it that way.
Pro-social behavior, right?
Right. But you build it in a way that if you do it pro-socially, right, if you do it collectively, then you can like do it in all the ways and use like whatever argument you're making. I'm going to go for it. But if you do it in the ridiculous way, and that's like the thing that people with ADHD sometimes need, like this lovely fantasy world to play this out in, is okay, but wait a minute, let me starting to learn. Okay, so I'm like literally finding iron traps that get me stuck and lock me in a room for an entire turn, so I can't do the thing until somebody comes to let me out. Or if I stay with everybody else, then I can jump off my teammate who I can coordinate my attack with to do an elbow drop and land him, like, and then it's rewarded, and I don't even have to roll for it, so that the dice gods don't factor into my decision, that I can just do the cool thing. And then you can, like, as a therapist who's not running a game, you can talk with clients who've had that experience playing games of, has there been a time when you let your character do that, or have you learned from something that perhaps the DM that was playing with you started to catch on to when your inner squirrel got you into trouble and people got frustrated with you, and then you adjusted and adapted? Is that something that you'd like to be able to use as a resource and remove the mental block that doesn't let you connect that those ideas all came from you?
Right.
This is all inside of you. You have this within you to do this, and then you can reinforce it and let it grow.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I try and do with my clients. Reinforce when they make, a decision that's working towards their goal. I'll reinforce it all day long. I always said when I started D&D, I would never fudge the dice as a DM, but as a therapeutic DM, it's goals and treatment over those dice. So if I need to fudge those dice, they're going to get fudged. I hope none of my players listen to this, but they're going to get fudged because I'm going to go for, reinforcing that behavior, or, making them feel really proud of themselves for succeeding at something, rather than just following the luck of the dice.
Right. Yeah. And in general, DMs and players don't always follow the same rule book. But the therapeutic DM and the players definitely sounds like need to be on a different rule book that enables the thing that needs to happen therapeutically to happen regardless of what the in-game universe rules might say.
Yeah. And that's what I do with the main thing that my characters do is write those goals into their backstory. And so I'll take all 5 backstories and then I'll write the campaign around those backstories. So I'll homebrew it. So I can create opportunities here and there, between them, make connections between the characters that they don't know about. That's my favorite part as a DM, being like, well, actually, you have this in common with each other that you didn't know. And they're like,
oh man, for the social skills group, that would be awesome. Like, oh, both your characters have this in common. Talk about that. And then it'll be like, blah, 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 and they have to improv through it, and they do awesome. And then you go like, and in the post-session breakdown, if that's a thing you guys do, like, so remember how you guys did that and it was awesome?
Yeah. I have 2 people playing. In real life. Exactly. I have 2 people playing bards by accident, and they're sitting next to each other at the table. And so they're like whispering back and forth to each other all the time, like, oh, what spell are you going to use? What spell are you going to use? When both of them are working on, making friends and social skills and, things like that. And I'm like, because all my groups are in person. So it's just amazing to watch, like, their faces light up, they're playing the game, they're meeting their goals. And then hopefully, and I've had clients go out and be like, I didn't even realize I did the work in group that I did, but I saw the result when I was outside in the real world. I even had a client text me like the day after a game and was like, what did you do? And I was like, I didn't do anything.
Right. I did nothing.
It was you, but I didn't do anything. It's almost like I know what I'm doing.
So kind of tying this back into the movie, I think a character like Jonathan would probably do well with something like that, in the sense of like regrouping like about this situation. And like these are all the ways in which you actually genuinely was helpful, in which you used the skills that you had, that you're not just a silly little buffoon who is like good for like chuckles and a drink and like a card game and a story, that you actually were able to do this, that, and the other once you were put in the position to do this, that, and the other.
Yeah. And, you know, I would probably, if I had to put Jonathan into a class, I wouldn't put as a therapeutic game master, I would put him into a bard, because he would still have all of the fun of being like boisterous and stuff like that if he wanted to be. But a bard is mostly a support character. Their spells and everything buff everybody else. So like you support that character, you support that character, you support that character. And a lot of the times people who are more introverted or who do have kind of that doubt about themselves think that they have to be this extroverted, like class clown to get people to like them. Whereas if they're playing a bard and they're a support character for the party, that is just as important as the fighter over there that's whacking the guy for 60 points.
Right, aka Rick O'Connell.
Right. So like taking these characters and putting them into a situation is like, hey, look, you know, being a support character doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. It means that that's just the way you play the game. That's the way that you live your life. You are someone who's going to, you know, support the rest of the team. That's just as important as, you know, being the frontliner.
Cool.
Yeah. So let me ask you, if Jonathan's a bard, which I think that's a reasonable argument. Like he's like a jack of all trades, right? Like that's pretty much what he is. Like, yeah, he has some roguishness to him, but like Benny is a straight up rogue.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What do you think Ardeth is? Is he a paladin or is he a monk?
Which that was the main magi guy, right?
Our narrator,
I don't know. I'd probably go with a monk. Although paladin sounds good at the same time, because no, he has an oath. So he has an oath that he's taken. So he's a paladin.
That's what I thought. I was thinking like, and he's using metal weapons, but like, yeah,
he believes in something so hard that it comes true. That is what a paladin is.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Like the reason why the magic works is because they believe in it so hard, it just suddenly becomes true. And
like Mike Wheeler from Stranger Things.
Right. You use that, and you have an oath as a paladin that there's different kinds in D&D. I don't know all the oaths, but yeah, he definitely had the oath to protect the city. So, yeah.
All
paladin.
right. Well, we'll
Hannah,
take our
Brittany,
final.
anything?
What?
Any treatment ideas from you two?
Babe, not for that conversation. Yeah, nothing.
Hey,
other than what I just said, which is I think Jonathan could benefit from, you know, using this situation to challenge his self-doubt. I think I do that with clients where I'm like, hey, where they don't make that connection from one setting to another, where they'll be like, hey, you know, I'm having trouble, I don't know, like asserting this or like using these skills in this place. I don't really know what to do, or like, I just don't think I can. And I'd be like, well, you know, you've been doing that in this setting or with this person. And they're like, oh shit, you're right. Like I have been doing that within that setting. And it's funny how many blind spots we have to ourselves. So I think that'd be something cool to do with Jonathan. But other than that, I don't really have. Evie seems fine. Her and Rick are gonna like, you know, ride off into the sunset and they'll be good. You know, I think probably if we did Mummy 2, I'd probably have more to say in terms of how they are as parents
and their child,
if you will. But since we're just focusing on the Mummy, I don't really have any more treatment wise to elaborate on. Anything from you, Hannah?
No, there really isn't anything that I can think of that feels like it would be helpful.
Hannah, I have to ask you because I feel like I want your input on this. What is it that Rick and Evie are going to do?
Sexually?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just setting her up.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I'm just like waiting for Hannah to be like, they're going to fuck. That's it.
Well, I would say, what do you think, Hannah, about their dynamic as a marriage therapist? Like, do you think they would need couples therapy? I mean, everyone could use couples therapy. But
everyone could use couples therapy.
Mhm.
But I would say, based on, their courting experience, which is basically in some way what we're seeing, that I don't foresee them needing to seek out counseling. I think it would make a lot more sense that they would need counseling around raising a child. And just because it seems like they'd probably come from two pretty different places in terms of the things that they think are important and the things that they think are not important. And so, especially when you have one person who grew up with money, that shit, it makes your life different. And that's sometimes, something that I have to talk to couples about or parents about, and you come from two completely different households. They can have really different expectations for what it's going to be like to be a parent, and can have a lot of different expectations about what they thought it would be like to be a parent or what kind of parent they want to be. And so I think, I would be surprised if they didn't need some support around parenting. Just because, again, it seems like they probably come from two pretty different places in general. But in terms of couples therapy, like, this is a couple that, maybe they come in for premarital counseling, right? Like, they're still in love. It's pretty new. They have similar interests. They have, financially, they don't have any problems that will make a huge impact on a relationship. Because money is one of those things.
Yeah.
Money is one of those things, So in a lot of ways,
money plays into relationships, Hannah? What? Are you a marriage therapist alleging that money factors into it? What?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that I think, in terms of them being a couple, that I think would go okay or would be pretty easy, pretty maneuverable around, and that it probably wouldn't be until they had kids that it really kind of was right in their faces of what their expectations are, or of like, my guess is old girl had a nanny and
almost
probably
certainly
was separated from parents for long periods of time. And who knows what it's like for Rick? Like, we really don't know anything about his history. But there would be, again, kind of that, like, does Evie think kids should be seen and not heard?
Yeah.
Like, does she think that did she always have to be quiet as a kid? Stuff like that. Or because she was so gifted and so intelligent, did she get a lot of attention because of that? And maybe Jonathan didn't.
It's almost certainly that one.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And so it would be interesting to see, but it really feels like until they have kids, they'd probably be pretty happy.
Yeah. Because I would say too, and this is kind of my final thoughts, but I can sort of jump on it here, is that what is so nice about watching this movie is they don't have any of the pitfalls of a movie like this, which I think they would have problems once the adrenaline has worn off of the situation, because he genuinely seems to really respect her. They compliment each other in that way. They're pretty decent communicators. They're not really keeping secrets. It's not one of those movies where he is keeping secrets from her because he doesn't think that she can handle it, or she's keeping secrets from him because she thinks he's an asshole or whatever. Like, they're pretty open and curious about each other. They get to know each other pretty well, actually. They're both very almost vulnerable with each other from jump. He seems to be really enamored with her in a way that is respectful. Not like, I don't know why I'm so attracted to this dumb broad kind of energy. It's more like, hey, so I saw that you like archaeology, and I saw this guy had archaeology tools, and so I thought maybe you like these archaeology. I think what's so interesting
I stole them from him so you can have them.
But I think what was so interesting watching it now, like, like being more keyed in, because I'm watching it from the therapist lens, is he looks, I mean, Brendan Fraser does a good job of looking very subtly nervous. That's the most nervous he looks the whole movie, is like doing this, taking this risk, vulnerability risk, right?
Yep.
Which is where someone who would probably feel more anxiety, vulnerability. So I think you're right, Hannah, in that I think they would get on like a house on fire. And I think that they have a lot of strengths already from the very beginning, in that he seems to really respect her. And she's someone who would need to be respected because of her intellect and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he seems like a man who likes women.
Yeah. Or he has no
goes a
beef
long
with her
way.
being a woman. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know.
So a lot of problems that pop up around that.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have any of the rampant toxic masculinity and internalized misogyny that we typically see in his stereotype of a character. He definitely doesn't have any of that, and he really lets her run the show in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he's got no boginess to him, you know?
Yeah, he's never
It
like,
makes
well,
me think
get
of,
behind me. Go ahead.
You know, like we were talking about watching Indiana Jones yesterday, like he's still misogynistic prick. He's still calling her sweetheart and honey and don't get your fucking feet wet or whatever. So that's at least one thing that this movie didn't have, which again would be positive, because at least he respects her as an equal in a way that we don't see, even though it's so few and far between in the film. Like we're really not seeing that much time go by. But even being able to see that from jump just makes a huge difference in terms of him taking her seriously. And men who are misogynistic don't. They don't listen. They don't give a shit.
And he was like right next to all of the people that were misogynistic. So like the guy that ran the museum, and then the other guy that was the head of the Americans, you know, when he said, you know, a woman can't know anything anyway. Whereas like Rick came in immediately and was like, okay, what we doing? You know, you saved my life. Let's go. You know?
Yeah. The only misogynistic thing he really does is asking for the kiss in the beginning. But I'm kind of like, if you're about to be hung from the neck till dead, you know,
and you've been in prison for 3 years.
I guess I can allow you shooting your shot in a kind of a douche way. And then the other time, I think, is him hefting her over his shoulder and throwing her in. But I feel like he would do that to Jonathan too, in some ways, if he liked Jonathan more. He'd be like, babe, this is not your rodeo. This is not where your strengths shine. So stay home, please, because I have enough to worry about. That's more of like the leash thing we were talking about earlier, where he's like, can you guys just stay in one spot? Because you're stressing me out and I can't do my part of this job effectively. But yeah, so we will take one final break there and then go to our final thoughts. All right, so I kind of already said mine. I think the only thing I would elaborate is I do love this movie. It's got a little cornball in it. The CGI is not holding up, y'all. Sorry to disappoint.
No, it's not. It's so bad.
I laughed out loud when the mummy letters came up in the beginning. It was so hardcore, like a CD-ROM I would have played, like a game I would have played on a CD-ROM on my computer, like Myst or something. But I still love this movie. I think it holds up in all the ways that matter, though. I think it's aging so crazy well. Like we were just talking about, like a lot of the pitfalls of old movies where we're like, ooh, like that's pretty shitty. That guy said that. That's pretty, you know, like misogynistic, you know, that sexist. I mean, this movie evades most of that. And the people who are saying it, like we just said, are the ones we're not supposed to like anyway. So whoever producer, writer, actor, whoever made the choice at some point along the story making of like, he's not going to be that kind of hero. Like, kudos to you. You saw the future and you were like, this movie is going to age as well as we can make it age, considering all the other factors. In that it's just really nice to see a couple that actually feels like a romantic couple where I'm rooting for them and they have good chemistry and they seem like they're on equal footing and he seems to respect her. You don't get that in many movies like this. You kind of just have to like make it work in your brain. So I think this movie stands up for the parts that we can forgive about it, and I will definitely watch it again. It's a fun movie. It kind of makes me want to watch The Mummy Returns. But But yeah, so I like it and I will keep watching it. Hannah?
Yeah, I like this movie. It's really fun. The story is pretty simple. I love Rachel Weisz, so that really helps. Yeah, I would probably watch it again, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and her eyebrows are fucking crazy. But they did it for, to make her look like she's from the 30s or whatever. But yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Charlene, if you want to go next.
As an adventurer at heart, I love this movie. So good. I love it every time I watch it. And I think too, I don't know how old everybody else is, but like back in 1999, having a feminist character that you could really respect and that was respected by the male lead was not common back then.
Yeah.
So I think as a teenage person who identifies as a female, having a strong female character being respected by their significant other was something really important to see, especially at that particular age. I think I was in the 8th grade, 9th grade, something like that. So I really love it. And, it definitely is useful story-wise. If I had my ADHDers or my, all the rest of the diagnoses.
For sure. All right, Ben, take it home.
Yeah, I still love this movie. It is not the most deep movie, and I 100% agree that the CGI could use another Passover. Let's just go ahead and just redo it, because this movie deserves to be watched for all the reasons we're talking about, and also just because it's a simple, fun movie. It's a simple monster movie. But it has enough complexity and layers to it that are kind of underpinned, that are positive, that did cause it to break through. This was not a movie that was banked on to break through, and it became a cult hit and a breakthrough, like, box office hit that people just loved and went to see. I mean, this is, still back in the days when we had the second run theaters, and I think this one got a whole second life in a second run theaters for the $1 shows or the $3 shows that I don't know those exist anymore, but are not common. But this movie still deserves to be shown and still seen because it's fun. It is a fun movie, and I get why people like it. Like, Brendan Fraser and all the rest of the cast are so charismatic. They're so charismatic.
Yeah.
Like, you just feel like you're having fun on an adventure with these goofs. And that these are people you'd probably go on an adventure with. As opposed to some of the other movies where you get like cranky ass or like narcissistic people, and like really none of them are unlikable, and it's fun, and everybody is attractive as hell. And there's something that somebody shared on Twitter some time ago that made me laugh really hard. They just said, like, my sexual identity is the cast of The Mummy.
Yep.
Yeah.
I saw that one.
It does seem to be
my
a
sexual
lot of
orientation is the cast of The Mummy.
Yes.
It does seem to be a lot of people's, like, at least bisexual awakening was The Mummy, where they're like, hold up, where's everybody from?
Right.
Where's everybody from?
and I get it. Like, there's a little something for everybody.
Rachel Weisz, so fucking beautiful, still beautiful. And it's like, I do love the old school movies where they give people those beauty shots.
Yeah.
And you're like, they have, the movie star has arrived to set, sir. Put a light on their face.
When she walks up with like the veil on and stuff, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they, plane her up quite a bit, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, I got a Nux Cinnamon. That made sense. Like, she did the whole body paint thing, which is also probably right when SI started that, of like, oh, yeah, that makes sense to me. I get that. And then Rachel Weisz shows up, and like, she's in the like the veiled garb and all that after she lost her clothes, and you're like, oh, okay. So she's not the librarian type. Movie got me. Yeah, she's all that, got me again. Yep. But
As if she was not beautiful, the absolute first fucking frame of her face in this movie, Ben.
oh, she was.
Agreed.
She was. But then they, leveled it up. Like you said,
Yeah.
the movie star has arrived. They glamour shotted it. But like this movie is fun. And when my daughter is a teenager or closer to an age where it's appropriate for her to see her and she can handle it, I look forward to like letting her watch this and like, just have a popcorn movie night. Sometimes we don't need the Deer Hunter. We just need something that's ridiculous and fun. And like, you just watch it and go like, I had a good time. And that was it.
God,
And this is that movie.
Yep.
What
Well,
else?
on that note,
Yeah.
so Charlene, where would you like to be found if people want to learn more about you following this episode?
Yes. You can find me on all social medias at Nat20Therapy. And then www.nat20therapy.com. That's my private practice. And then I do have a podcast called Mental Health Quest, The Therapist Office and Beyond, where we talk about, we're on our treatment series. So we bring in experts and talk about treatment and kind of talk about diagnoses and treatment in what I like to call Charlene terms. So that's where you can find me.
All right, cool. And as always, you can find us at Popcorn Psychology on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us at popcorn_psych on Twitter. You can always email us at popcornpsychology@gmail.com. If you would like to support us anyway, you can go to TeePublic and get some merch with our name on it and our logo. Or you can become a patron on Patreon. We really appreciate that as well. And as always, leave us a rating and review wherever you listen. We read your reviews. We really appreciate them. And it's the quickest way for people who don't know about us to know about us. All right. So everyone go adventuring, but do it in a cool way and in a collective way, y'all. All right.
And then
see
go
you
watch
later.
Van Helsing.
Ew, gross. Goodbye.